Hey guys, welcome back to Andy's Dinosaur Reviews, and today we are going to take a look at not just one, not two, we are going to check out three brand new Jurassic World figures. These are the brand new Legacy Collection figures that have just recently come out. We've got a Cosmoceratops, a Pachycephalosaurus, and a Velociraptor. The Velociraptor looks like maybe it's some sort of a strange attempt at creating a Lost World Tiger Striped Raptor. The Pachycephalosaurus is clearly a Lost World Jurassic Park version, although I think we've had a better version in the past. And then we also have a Cosmoceratops, which is a really nice sculpt, but might be one of the worst paint jobs that I've ever seen on a Mattel figure. But since we had three figures, none of which I feel like are particularly incredible enough that it should get its own dedicated individual review for each, I figured we'd just take a look at all three together and just mark them off the list in one shot as far as reviews go. So let's go ahead, pop these out of the boxes, and then jump straight to a closer look at them right now. So we are going to start with probably the weakest out of the group, and that is the Velociraptor. Now, we have had this sculpt in the past. We have reviewed this exact sculpt, so we don't need to take a look at the sculpt. We basically just need to look at what's different on this one compared to the previous release, and that is definitely the coloration. So you can see as far as the color goes, we've kind of like an orange tone for the face, and you can see we also have a very light green eye with a black pupil. There are some speckles showing up here on the face to add a little color variation, but not too much. We have an articulated jaw as well, and the mouth can open pretty wide. We've got a nice pinkish tone on the inside of the mouth, as well as some fairly nice looking teeth as far as the paint goes. The sculpt definitely looks nice, but the teeth are a little... I mean, they look okay. They're kind of slightly sloppy, but not too bad. I will say once I turned it around, though, I noticed that there's some of the paint, I guess from the teeth, has run up here onto the snout of the raptor, so a little bit of sloppiness there, but you can see the eye paint over here again is pretty nicely placed, which is a plus. Once we lead back here to the back of the neck, we have like a brownish variation of color that appears. It's a really smooth transition, you can see right there, and really smooth transition here as well, so it's a nice realistic transition and a nice looking tone of color. And then as we lead down here into the back, you can see that that tone kind of continues, like it runs down the neck, but then it stops very briefly before picking back up, and then stopping briefly again before picking back up, and then stopping entirely right there. And within these two areas here of that alternate tone of brown, we have like some black striping that runs down the back of the raptor. We also have some of that striping running down the thighs. It is nice to see some paintwork down into the thighs of the figure, but I will say as a whole, the lack of color on the tail of the figure really takes away a lot from this one, because there's not really anything that's particularly impressive when it comes to the paint scheme of this one, because you basically just have like some random tones of orange and brown, and then some black stripes hidden within these brownish tones in the back, and then nothing out here on the tail. We do have some speckles that I don't know if you could see picking up here. So there's a little bit of alternate coloration, but it's just kind of very uninspired, very unappealing as far as the coloration goes. It's definitely not the worst thing in the world, but it's not really that great. And then here, like, I don't understand this at all. You have like a random splotch of the white starting at the top of the chest, and it ends before we even really get too far into the stomach. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me at all to have this coloration here. They should have just either included it along the underside of the figure or not included it at all, because just having that area, it looks like somebody just kind of vandalized the raptor when it was running by, and then they sprayed some spray paint on his chest and then took off. But not the best figure, that's for sure. We do have a DNA scan code, which we will try to pull out there. We've got the Jurassic World logo on one side, and then we've got the scan code again on the other side. So the figure as a whole is certainly not my favorite raptor. We don't have any painted nails. We don't really just have much in general going on. Probably one of the worst paint jobs I think that Mattel has delivered in the entire line of Jurassic World figures. Then we've got ourselves a Pachycephalosaurus, and it is nice to see the Pachycephalosaurus come back and get another figure, a newer one. But the coloration of this one, although nice, isn't really anything to write home about, because we have had some Lost World style Pachycephalosaurus figures in the past, and I felt like they were pretty nice. So this one Looking similar, I'm definitely going to have to try to dig out my other one so that I can see them together, but this one looking similar is actually kind of cool when you think about it because it creates an alternate version where they could look like they belong in the same group with having some slight differences. But as far as the coloration goes, again, we've reviewed the sculpt, so we don't need to look at the sculpt, just the color of this one. And you can see we have an area of blue there around the eye. You can also see the eye looks like it's honestly got no color to it at all. It's just the light gray that we see for the majority of the body. And then we have some light gray up here on the dome of the Pachycephalosaurus. The transition to the light gray is really smooth. It's very nice looking, but we don't have any color for the beak or anything, which is a bit of a downside. There's really nothing else going on the face color-wise aside from just this area of blue, the dome skull, and then a black pupil, and that's about it. Once we start to run down the course of the back of the Pachycephalosaurus, though, you have a really nice looking tone of bluish green up here on the back. I really like that color. I love the tone, and I think it looks fantastic on this figure, and I like how they've kind of allowed some of the grayish coloration to sort of creep through some of the scales moving down the course of the figure. As we lead out into the tail, you see that kind of splotchy look continue, but now it turns into a striping effect, but stops very abruptly. If it would have continued the course of the entire tail, I really feel like the figure would have looked way nicer, but unfortunately, again, it stops pretty abruptly. We do have more areas of that kind of bluish green picking up here in the thigh, as you can kind of see it splotching through, but that's about it. I honestly don't even see any speckling here on the side or anything. We don't have painted nails at all. Kind of looks like we might have a bit of a gloss coat to them, but that's really about it there. And similar to the raptor, again, we just have like a random area of coloration here on the underside in the chest region. This time we have a brown, another area that really doesn't make sense to me, doesn't look like it belongs. But the sculpt is absolutely beautiful. Like, it is an incredible version of a Lost World Jurassic Park style Pachycephalosaurus. Mattel really did a great job on the sculpt of this figure, but the paint job, although definitely better than the Raptor, still isn't anything to really go crazy over or, rush out and grab immediately. I feel like this has a very strong potential to be a shelf warmer, but it's still a pretty nice looking figure, just nothing amazing. And before I forget, there is the fax app code there for, if it would focus, for the Pachycephalosaurus as well. So just wanted to throw that out there really quickly before we move on to this one, the most exciting figure of the group, which is the Cosmoceratops, a figure that we have not had in the line before. But this is the most confusing one because as far as a legacy line goes, I think the only time this dinosaur has ever appeared in any of the Jurassic films was in a skeleton in Lockwood's home, and I believe that's about it. I really don't think it's ever made an appearance, and honestly, it is so brief where you would see this that this is really a stretch for them to have chosen this as a Legacy Collection figure. When it was officially announced as a Legacy Collection figure, I was so confused. But at least this one is a brand new sculpt, and you can see the detailing of it is incredibly nice here on the head sculpt of the dinosaur. Fantastic skin texture through the course of the Cosmoceratops. You can see the nostrils sculpted out there, some nice detailing there in the beak of the dinosaur. You can also see the nice cracks and crevices in the horns of our Cosmoceratops. And the coloration is definitely not very good. First of all, again, just like the others, we don't really have any real eye paint. Well, actually, just like the Pachycephalosaurus, the Raptor did have eye paint, but we only have a black pupil. So they could have at least given us some alternate coloration for the eyes, and that would have helped a lot. If they would have given us color for the eyes, color for the beak, and then some coloration aside from this reddish brown sort of color there at the bottom of the horn to actually paint out the horns, this figure would have looked way nicer, I think, because I don't think the paint job is terrible. It's not as bad as the Raptor, but it still, again, could have been better. That's definitely for sure. We do have another area of that kind of reddish brown here, out here on the snout, before transitioning back to the green, and then giving us some more of that reddish brown that sort of encases the lower part of the horns before running up into the frill. And then once we get up here into the frill, you can kind of see some really nice scale detail, but you also can see we have a stripe that runs down and then goes back up. So basically some upside down triangles here in the frill, which does add, some flashiness to the frill, and that's what you would probably like to see on a ceratopsian. You also see a kind of a light gray or an off-white running along the outer edge of the frill here that just sort of encases all of these spikes that run along the frill in that coloration. You can see them running along the top as well are painted in that color, and then running down along the other side. But it's not just the spikes that have been given that paint, because you can see it does run onto the frill itself. So it does add some extra color variation, but it's not incredible, that's for sure. I feel like whoever was given the task of coming up for the paint schemes of these legacy figures, I don't know if they were new to Mattel or if they just had no experience in this area or what, because the colors are just so random and the paint applications are so random. It just seems so off when it comes to a Mattel release, because they're usually really good at coming up with some pretty creative and cool looking paint schemes. You can see down here in the underside, though, there's some nice detail in the throat as we move back into the chest region and then back up into the side of the Cosmoceratops. You can see some osteoderms picking up here through the course of the figure, and some more incredible scale detail. The sculpt of this is just as absolutely beautiful as it gets when it comes to the fine detail. Very vibrant scale detail, and it is just jam-packed when it comes to the fine detail. You see more of the osteoderms moving down into the leg, leading down to the foot. The foot has a really nice appearance as far as the toes, kind of like some scoots running down the toes. No nail paint, that's kind of just not a surprise at all. But you can see that we primarily have kind of like a darker green, sort of, and then we have these really light green stripes that run along the back of the Cosmoceratops. You can kind of pick out the spinal column right there. Some beautiful scale detail there on the back of the frill of the dinosaur as well. You can see like a really cool row of osteoderms that run along the dinosaur here all the way out onto the tail. Very unique and interesting look for this figure. And you can also see, again, some more clusters of osteoderms here in the thigh region. Varying sizes. You can see some are really big, some are fairly small. Some nice muscle definition as well, leading down into the calf. You can definitely see the calf muscle. Again, all of the detailing really does look fantastic on this figure. And you've also got another nice foot sculpt. And then again, you lead out the length of the tail. Nice short tail for your Ceratops. And you can see some splotches of like some whites randomly out here, which makes me wonder if it's like this color that they used up here and they just kind of slopped it out there, because I don't see it really anywhere else. I mean, maybe slightly I can pick up on it. You can see a little bit more here in the tail, but not too much. But again, sculpting and detailing wise, it doesn't look too different over here anymore so than what we saw on the initial side. You can see that all of the paint looks pretty much the same. But the sculpt on this is absolutely fantastic. A really nice, really highly detailed sculpt from Mattel. So the sculpt, as per usual, follows the same line as all of the other Mattel sculpts when it comes to having a lot of really nice detail and just being an incredible looking sculpt. But the paint job of this is lackluster, to say the least. Still not the worst of this group of Legacy Collection figures. That's definitely the Raptors' claim to fame there, but it also, again, is still not very good. I really hope to see another repaint of this in the future with a much better paint scheme, because this does not do the figure justice. With a sculpt this nice, it's sad to see that the paint job isn't really that good. Now, as far as articulation on our figures goes, we have neck articulation in the Cosmoceratops, as well as leg articulation forward and back. It can also come out away from the body, and I just had it move, so I couldn't get it back in. We also have leg articulation in the back, and again, this is the same for both sides. It does have the ability to kind of open the legs a little bit. You can see that. And then tail articulation, but the tail articulation activates an action feature, which you can see is definitely the right action feature for this dinosaur. So you've got a nice rearing action with the head. Perfect action feature for this species, but again, the paint job isn't very good. The Raptor is, your standard when it comes to the articulation of a Raptor. You've got the jaw articulation, works very nicely. The neck is a little stiff, but for the most part works pretty well. It can go up and down and then swivel entirely. You also have arm articulation forward and back, as well as out away from the body. And then the leg articulation here, very nice. A little bit out away from the body, actually. And then you have a swivel tail, which as well is really stiff. And then maybe the worst action feature in Mattel's entire line, this thing here, whatever that is. I guess that's how you're supposed to operate this. I still honestly don't know for sure. I think it's supposed to be like a slashing claw action feature. It is so weird. You would think it would have been given like a button at the very least to do this. It's like they were just trying to plan out an action feature and they were like, I don't know, just who cares? Let's move on to something else. And that's what they came up with, I guess. And then the Pachycephalosaurus, you can see we have the articulation in the neck. Again, that's part of the action feature. You also have articulation here in the head. Doesn't work too well, but it definitely articulates. The arm forward and back, and then out away from the body like your usual articulation, and then legs forward and back. Very nice. Out away from the body a little bit, so you can do some exercises with your Pachycephalosaurus. And then we also have articulation in the tail, which, just like the Cosmoceratops, will activate the action feature. Again, perfect for what you would like on a Pachycephalosaurus. As far as a size goes, and you probably already have a good idea of the size because the Raptor, again, was released prior. It's really not much different from your usual Raptor. The Pachycephalosaurus has been out numerous times, was one of the first figures to be released by Mattel, was a Pachycephalosaurus, so you've probably got a good idea of that one as well, but regardless, here we'll go get a size. You're looking at about 7 3/4 inches, or around 19.5 centimeters in length for the Pachycephalosaurus, and for a height just shy of 4 inches, or around 10 centimeters. For the Raptor, you are looking at about the 7 1/4 inch area, or about 18.5 centimeters. And then for a height, about 3 3/4 inches, or 9.5 centimeters. And then the Cosmoceratops, we'll bring over here, who is the smallest of the group. Weird that the ceratopsian would be smaller than a raptor, but okay. You're looking at about, I would say, about 6 3/4 inches, maybe approaching 7 inches, or about the 17.5 centimeter area, somewhere in that vicinity. For a size comparison, we kind of created a dinosaur train, and no, not that show. A dinosaur train kind of with our dinosaurs all here leading in a row to give us a comparison here with these other figures, but you can see they fall right in the same size range as all of the, usual attack pack, wild pack style figures that we've had in the past, your Savage Strike style. They all fall right in that same similar size range as all of those figures, and I would like to think that these figures in their own right with the Cosmoceratops probably give you a pretty good comparison and a good idea of the size, because we've had those sculpts again previously. The only new sculpt is the Cosmoceratops, so that's probably the only one that you're really unfamiliar with, but again, the size falls right in that same sort of like attack pack or Savage Strike size range. And here is one of the previously released Mattel Pachycephalosaurus in comparison to the newer one, giving you a good idea of the fact that they actually look really similar, but not too similar. They definitely have some differences, like the overall tone of color of the body and everything are really quite different, but at least the older one did have eye paint specifically and not just the same light gray of the body. Regardless, again, they look pretty similar, not too far off, and definitely look like they would make a really cool group together. So these 3 Legacy Collection releases from Mattel for the Jurassic World toy line are pretty fun, but not great. The Raptor is definitely the least appealing of all. Like, it's not really that great. I wasn't a big fan of the sculpt in the first place of that Raptor. I think it is okay. Like, the head sculpt is great, but the body has some very weird looking proportions. It's just shaped weirdly, but the figure as a whole, has a weird action feature that I don't like. The color scheme's not very good. The paint application is okay, but as a whole, it's one of the worst Velociraptors I think I've ever seen from Mattel. The Pachycephalosaurus is pretty nice. It's not bad. Not as great as, it could be, but it's nice as far as the tones of color used. That kind of bluish green on the back is beautiful. I love that appearance to the figure. The only thing that I'm not a huge fan of on this one is the fact that we have the same gray for the body as the eye color, and that random splotch of brown on the underside just doesn't make any sense to me. But as a whole, the Pachycephalosaurus is actually much nicer here in hand than I was expecting it to be. The Cosmoceratops is gorgeous as far as the sculpt goes. I really, really love the sculpt of this figure. Very highly detailed as always, but the paint job is another one of those instances where it's just not really that great. It's not as bad as the Raptor, again, but it's also not really that wonderful either. I feel like just some more nicer looking paint application to the head really could have helped the figure a lot, like giving the horns some paint application, the beak some paint application, and the eye actual color outside of a black pupil would have really helped this figure tremendously. But as a whole, it's still a nice looking figure, and one that I can definitely say is a fun addition to the Jurassic line. So again, some interesting figures here, some pretty nice, some not so nice. Either way, I will include links in the description to all three of these on the Target website, or again, you can pick them up in store if you would like to do that. Again, sometimes it's just more fun to go on the hunt for the dinosaurs rather than ordering them online. One way or another, though, some are definitely worth picking up, some are not. But before you go deciding what you're going to do as far as these figures go, make sure you like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next review. Thanks for watching.